The information provided in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Viewers should use their own discretion and consult with a healthcare professional for personalized guidance and recommendations. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Health Revolution. We are so glad you're here. I am your host, Adriana Morrison, and it is all about having those amazing conversations, elevating that health and wellness, and empowering transformation. And so, one thing I do want to point out to you, as we are so glad that you're here, is that wherever you're tuning in from, wherever you're streaming in, whether it's live or you're catching the on demand replay, just know, and as a reminder, at the bottom of the episode, if you toggle down to where it says show notes, you're going to find an incredible wealth of information for everything that we've talked about and some reference links for you to take advantage of for those of you who feel like, and I feel like it's so many of us that are going to feel like this episode is going to speak to us. And so I am thrilled for today's episode, especially if you are someone or if you know someone who is struggling with chronic pain, the pain that just seems to linger and does not seem to dissipate. Well, we're going to cover all of that and how we can tap into the ways to heal and to unlock our power. So without further ado, I'd like to talk about my guest today. Her name is Elizabeth Kipp, and she is a stress management and historical trauma specialist. It's a lot because she covers a lot. She brings that credibility. She uses trauma trained and yoga informed addiction recovery coaching, ancestral clearing, compassionate inquiry, and yoga to help people with their healing. Elizabeth she has healed from over 40 years of chronic pain. And that includes anxiety, panic attacks, and addiction. She now works to help others achieve the same healing for themselves that she has experienced directly from the work that she teaches. She is the best-selling author of The Way Through Chronic Pain, the tools to reclaim your healing power. This is very important information. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up my guest, Elizabeth Kipp. Elizabeth, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Adriana. It's great to be here with you.
It is great to have you here. This is very important for us to talk about, and I'd like to dive in. So you're covering a lot and you've had years of experience. And so can you share with us what led you to cover chronic pain? What are some, why delve into this as your line of work?
Well, thank you for the question. I'd like to start by defining chronic pain for everyone. It's not just physical. It's physical, emotional. Any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more is chronic. That's physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, financial, any pain. The brain can't tell the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart. It all sends the same signal to the brain. And why is that important? Because the brain is fundamentally changed by chronic pain. We get a brain fog. It triggers something affects the emotional center in the brain. So our emotions get very negative. Anybody who's listening to this who has a chronic pain issue will recognize those symptoms. I can't remember what I just did. I can't think straight, and I'm mad at the world, or I don't understand, or something's wrong with me, or something's wrong with you, or that kind of thing. So very important. Why I got into this was because I had a long journey with chronic pain for like 40 years. And for a long time, really for 31 of those years, when I was actually, the doctors were actually focused on that, pretty much everybody except the very last doctor I found said, you have to learn to live with this. You're not going to heal from it.
Did that shock you when you kept getting that as a response over and over from the healthcare providers that you were seeing?
Well, it shocked me the first time.
Yeah.
I really was surprised because the doctor said, you will, be in level 7 out of 10 pain for the rest of your life. You will be in a wheelchair when you're 40. Here are your opiates and your benzodiazepines, your anti-anxiety medicine. Learn to live with it. That's the best quality of life we can give you. I had an advantage because I had been trained as a scientific researcher, and we learned how to kind of think critically. And after I got over the shock of that prognosis, which devastated me at the time, because I looked at him as an expert and thought, well, I guess he knows everything and I don't know this area. So, I guess this is my lot in life. But there was a part of me that said, something's not right here. And it took me a little while to sort it out, but I realized he'd forgotten his basic science, which is science is about probabilities, not facts. And he said, you will. So he was kind of forgetting basic science right there. He didn't leave any room for hope, which is, that's a tough spot to put a patient in, right? So that was number one. And number two was, it was telling me more about the model that he was working in.
Now, did you find that this was the first doctor that you were that you began to try to figure out a way to manage the pain or to address it, right? Did you notice that this was a unusual pattern, a surprising pattern going forward? Was it just, him being the one that made those definitive statements to you?
Well, I had 2 surgeries to try and stabilize an issue with my low back, and the pain was just getting worse, and the doctors kept giving me more medication or not enough, or that they didn't have any other answer. And so plus my husband was also a researcher, and I put my thinking cap on, and I had him backing me up, making sure I wasn't making an illogical step one way or the other. And really, I saw that he's this medical science at that point is we're all operating in a paradigm shift. We know this. We didn't used to know that about plate tectonics. Well, now we know, right? So it makes a difference. So I knew paradigm shift. So I knew what he was telling me wasn't necessarily set in stone. And then the other thing was that he was telling me more about the limitations of the model that he was working in than he was telling me about the human body's ability to heal. And I just knew about that because I had studied neuroscience, like I started when I was like 18 or something, early in college, and I kept seeing the changes. Like we used to, when I was 18 and I was in neuroscience, they thought the brain was fixed. And by the time, the 80s or mid 80s or whenever it was came along, oh, the brain can change. It can heal itself. It's plastic. It changes all the time. Complete paradigm shift, right? I knew that thing. So I was like, okay, he's got a limitation. And other doctors kept saying that. And I kind of would like, okay, I see you're sitting in the same paradigm. And this is the scope of your knowledge. Now, this is not to diss doctors, but this is to understand that they have a knowledge that they're working in, and they have a framework that they're working in, and they also have, insurance companies and all kinds of, I don't want to call them blinders, but they're kind of like set points that they can't go outside of. And when we sit in front of a doctor, we need to understand that. And I understood that. Yeah, it took me a while to get there, but that's where I got to.
Do you think that his dialogue and that he was more operating from his scope of training, but not being careful with his words? Or do you think that maybe at the time your particular doctor was just in the belief of, well, it is what it is, and so that's the way it must be?
Well, I can't speak to the state of his mind. I just know what I had to. He gave me information, and I had to do something with it. It was up to me to claim it or not. Right? It was up for me this is what he has to offer, and so thank you very much. And that's so I kept looking. Also, remember, we exist in the all that is, and science can only talk about, really comment on what it can observe, measure, and describe. And the scientific paradigm, the Western medicine sits in that paradigm.
So how did you, and I think this is great, and I appreciate you being real clear with just the parameters that, especially across time, that doctors are, referencing their scope of training, that sort of thing. At what point did you decide there must be more to the story? And I'm going to decide to be resilient, and I'm going to continue to search, because it can be defeating to be told this from an expert, from someone who's speaking from his scope of training. But at what point did you decide, you know what, I must keep going?
Yeah, 2 weeks after he told me that.
So
I was, like I said, I was devastated. I cried for 2 weeks, and I felt like I was like lost in this closet, and I couldn't find the doorknob or the door to the doorknob. I couldn't, like, I knew there was light in there somewhere. I just couldn't find it. And then I was like, aha, very limited space this guy's coming from. We heal in the all it is. Science can only talk about, it can only address the part that it can observe, measure, and describe. So I knew I had to look outside of that paradigm in order to find the answer. And that's where I did find the answer. This is kind of cool.
So what did the dialogue look like as you were still moving forward? So now it's been 2 weeks. You had huge, you had big cry fest. This was very devastating. You were processing it. You then made a decision to keep going, to find the answers that could be helpful and beneficial to you. So what did that dialogue look like as you were continuing to figure out who can, from the medical space, be in your corner, or who else beyond, who all could be in your corner?
Great question. So as I said, my husband, ex-husband at this point, but was a science researcher himself, and so we were in biology. We weren't really doctors, but we were in biology, so we knew enough to be able to get in the literature and see what was going on, and ask the doctors at their level. So the dialogue looked like, we need to talk to the doctors at we need to learn as much as we can so we can have a conversation as like equals. And really on our side of that conversation was, what are the questions we need to ask? Right? I mean, you can ask questions until you're blue in your face, but you got to ask the right question. And of course, that's, when we learn to be a scientific researcher, that's part of the training. Ask the right question, right? That's the trick. So asking the right question to the person in front of us, so that we can get as much information that they can offer, and then, kind of recognize what their limit is and what they bring to the table.
So this is great, because it sounds like how I'm hearing all of this, that you were for quite some time in the information gathering process. So even though you didn't have, like, say, the answers, it was still trying to paint that landscape. Would you say that was, that looking back, that was in that process, that you've yet to form a clear step-by-step blueprint of what to do next?
A lot of it was yes. And I really had to, first of all, remember, I was on opiates and benzodiazepines all this time. So that's affecting my ability to think straight. And I was a pretty high functioning person on that medication, but still obviously affected by it. Right. So thank goodness for my husband, because he wasn't on any of that. And so we could bounce the ball back and forth. Really, my situation was one where the discovery around neuroscience kept moving. There was a lot more information that kept coming into the system, and even the approach to dealing with addictive drugs changed over time for me, which was really kind of baffling. But it is what it is. The word trauma was only used back in those days to mean physical trauma. There wasn't any discussion of trauma the way we talk about it today. Trauma informed was not a thing, right? so yes, get information gathering, but it was the information was always changing. And so we'd learn one little bit, and then we'd learn another little bit, and we'd bring an acupuncturist in, and when I had a yoga teacher come in, and we had a massage therapist, and et cetera. So we had a lot of different perspectives on the healing journey, and it was interesting because ultimately the answer was I found a doctor who really was a brain specialist, was a neurophysiologist, and a Qigong healer. And it was my wish during this whole time, I wish that East and Western medicine would meet. And they met in this doctor. And he looked at me the first time and he said, I don't want to look at your x-rays or look at your records. I want to know who you are. And I'm like looking at this guy going, who are you? And where have you been all my life? That is not something the doctors were asking me. They were looking at my x-ray. And if you look at my x-ray on my back, you'll get 3 different patients. You'll get one patient, and I have this broken and dislocated bone in my 5th lumbar. It's slipped forward 80%, and the leg nerves with it. So it's stabilized with hardware, but it's still abnormal, right? You get 3 different patients. You get one who's in pain all the time. You get another who's only in pain when they're stressed. And you get another one who's not in any pain at all. How do you describe that by just looking at the x-ray? How can you explain that? You can't.
That's true. And so in having this conversation, this was the first time, this was a turning point. So it was almost as though the dialogue had a switch, the type of dialogue you had for any specialist that you were trying to figure out the next step, that this was that moment in time where things had changed for you.
Oh, correct? Yeah. I became very aware of what can this doctor or healer bring to the table and where are they limited? And I was very clear on that. Yeah.
So as you're moving through and you worked with him, what then did you find how did you process going forward? Did you feel like suddenly you were optimistic? Were you still at that time still battling the intensity of the pain that you were enduring? Like, what was that like for you going forward?
Well, I ultimately, that's such an important question. I ultimately had a sense of a higher power. I always kind of did. And I really kind of surrendered to that and said, you know what? I was going to be a researcher. I was going to be a remote sensing specialist. Like I had this thing going and now I've got this thing going and this is not what I planned. So clearly you have something else in store, which I had no idea what it was, but I had no other choice but I could have fought against that. I could have, that would have just made things worse. But I surrendered to my experience and said, well, I guess I need to work the solution here. And again, I was grateful for my family, which was very supportive. And it wasn't like the doctors around me weren't trying to support me. They just had like limitation. So I just kept moving forward with everything that I could. We did a lot of interesting physical therapy and the doctors worked really hard we brought in acupuncture, which was, thank goodness, that was huge. But I was still on medicine and
I think this is pretty powerful that you're talking about this transition, because not only does it serve for your personal journey, but obviously taking that turning point professionally, what you could bring to the table. And I think this is, and we're definitely going to dive more into this. This is phenomenal and powerful. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back here on the Health Revolution. Stay tuned.
Coming this spring, by popular demand, the second season show on the Tour of Love.
And the E360 TV platform is saying we want the Tour of Love.
With winner of the first Global Impactor Award, Tamara Hunter, along with Emmy-winning co-host Skip Thomas.
We are going on tour, on the road. It's time. Love unites, and there is healing through connections. This is a worldwide movement, the Tour of Love.
We're back here on the Health Revolution. We are spending some incredible and important time with my guest, Elizabeth Kipp. As a recap, she is a stress management and historical trauma specialist. We've been talking about her revelations in pivoting with dealing with chronic pain. She shared with us that she was dealing with chronic pain for quite some time, finally found a doctor, a specialist, East versus Western medicine within him. And he created the space, the right conversations to start thinking beyond what we've come to know, say in the form of like just x-rays or just simple approaches to handling pain. So at that point, so as you're moving through and you're starting to work with acupuncturists, you're starting to work with different specialists, what did you observe was happening with your body, and what could you tell, what different avenues was your mindset shifting to continue to think outside the box?
Oh, well, let me take you kind of fast forward. I met the East meets West doctor 31 years into this journey.
Okay.
I went into his program and I was there. I walked in with 52 days of chronic pain, 40 years of chronic pain, and walked out 52 days later with no pain at all. And
wow.
You're going to ask me what switched. One, he understood. First of all, he got me off all those medications. He detoxed me off all those medications. Thank goodness.
Wow.
Which was amazing. Anybody who's on or who's about to go on medications like that, they're addictive. Here's the question. Ask the doctor, what's the exit plan before you go on it?
That's powerful.
Okay. So just saying, right? So I wasn't special in that program. He had a 94% success rate, right? So that's interesting to me. And what did he do? He understood you can't separate mind, body from spirit. What happens to one happens to all. He understood the nature of chronic pain in the brain. Because chronic pain changes the brain, we have to bring modalities that heal those changes, right? And he brought in modalities that healed those changes, which is why we all healed so quickly. So wow. That's not, all the other doctors didn't have that equation. They didn't understand the things that opiates and benzos do not heal the changes that happen in the brain because of pain. They kind of make things worse.
We've seen and we've heard of just reports and what have you, just the impact of those medications. You're absolutely right. So you were so you said 52 days in, was it 52 days in? And within that time frame, you were off medication. You were in essence pain-free.
Yeah, I got off the medication. It took 10 days in a hospital bed, detox bed, to kind of like deal with that, because it was, the last 15 years was fentanyl and Ativan. So it was like,
oh my goodness,
it's kind of an amazing detox. But so by the time I was 52 days out of there, I'd been 42 days clean of all that medication. Now it took me time to clear the body really of all that. And it took a number of years really to clear the effects, the fallout from the benzodiazepines. That anti-anxiety medicine is just difficult on many levels, especially to sleep. And when you're trying to heal and your sleep is fragmented, that just kind of makes it a little more challenging, right?
Oh, absolutely. The body doesn't get a chance to rest and recover from a quality standpoint. So now you've experienced, at this point in time in your journey, you've experienced being pain-free. What happened next for you? What were some of the actionable steps you took to continue to be pain-free and to take things to a new level?
Well, my nervous system was wound up like a top. I was I was just like this from all those years. At this point, I could feel it. And I was just, oh man, it's a very high baud rate, and I work at I'm very high intensity anyway, but I'm a lot calmer than I used to be, and meditation was really helpful for that. I had a yoga practice. Went straight up into Kundalini yoga, which is I went very carefully, which is it's very quick at shifting, changing old patterns up and shifting energy. And I was like, okay, that's good for me. I'll take it. Right. So I went into that. I went into therapy and dealt with a bunch of childhood trauma, that psychological trauma that I hadn't even realized had been suppressed for so long. I didn't even know it was there. Right. So that was, this is the thing. All those doctors, until I met Dr. Prescott, who was the last guy, all those doctors never asked the question, why isn't Elizabeth healing? They just assumed I wouldn't. And Peter Prescott asked the question, what's blocking her healing?
Do you think that, so your self-care at that time, did you know to optimize how to take care of yourself? And I know back then we didn't use the terminology that we do today in terms of taking care of the self and all of that. But how did that translate for you in terms of, was that the first time in which you knew that you needed to integrate self-care and to put you at the top spot?
Well, there were a couple things about that. One, it really wasn't until I went into that program that I knew to put myself first. I kind of grew up to, as soon as I could walk, I was like, I went into service for the family. It was like, I serve, I'm a woman, that's what we do. So that changed. But I really, I was like a manager at the Newark Food Co-op back in like 1973 or 4. So I was a health food nut, like way back in the day. And I always pursued that to my best ability. It wasn't until after I got out of Dr. Prescott's program that we understood, oh, I have a really high gluten allergy. Oh, I can't even digest the base protein in casein, right? I have a very sensitive inflammatory response. So we have to take out this food, this food, this food. Oh, I'm allergic to these foods and I'm sensitive to these. And so we just shifted the diet along with the therapy, the movement, and the meditation. The meditation is so important to calm the mind. And in my case, coming off of benzodiazepines, because the brain gets a chance to rest in meditation, thank goodness, that would be like the one thing anybody coming off of benzodiazepines, get a meditation practice. I'll help you. I'm a great teacher because sleep is an issue and meditation kind of cuts that in half.
So this is, at the time, this was pretty innovative. Did Dr. Prescott, did he take you through, was his program the template by which you, that you got ideas from to then figure out where to go next to continue the healing and then subsequently, what you do for others?
The only thing he was really more Qigong and I was yoga, and he's like, they're both great. So whatever. So I went right up into LA after I got out of that program and spent a couple of months and walked into Golden Bridge Yoga and started Kundalini Yoga. And I was like, and I could feel my body healing so quickly. It's like, yeah, this is my path, right? Qigong is also amazing. I was so impressed with Qigong, but he laid out the template and I just kept going. One of the other things that happened in that program, it was so powerful, was John Newton of Health Beyond Belief was a wellness practitioner in there, and he brought in ancestral clearing, which is how I got into historical trauma in the first place.
Talk a little bit about that ancestral clearing.
Yeah. So the idea there is that we come into this life with the gifts and the burdens of our ancestors, and you can say informationally, like epigenetically, or just energetically, kind of depending on what terminology you want to use. It's a very concrete example. Rachel Yehuda and her team did research on survivors of descendants of people that were in the Holocaust, survived the Holocaust, and found that their cortisol levels were different, and that they didn't have as much resilience as the rest of the population. So the people that hadn't experienced that. Now, the good news there is, like we said, the brain and the nervous system is plastic, and so we can retrain it to become more and more resilient. So that's the good news there. But the finding was that this is passed down through generations, and ancestral clearing is a process that helps us release the burden, the weight, the charge that we carry around certain issues.
So I find this completely fascinating, because you're coming at this from different angles to help elevate self-care to where it needs to be. And so did you know at the time that it was the amount of time, or could you have guesstimated the amount of time it would take for you to feel like you've overcome a lot of the obstacles that you were facing back then?
Well, first of all, I don't think I overcame anything. I feel like that was a group project. I had higher power holding me the whole time, and I had an army of support of people that helped me. So just so we're clear on that, right? I really felt like I was divinely inspired, and I feel like there were people around me that were divinely inspired. When I went to to Dr. Peter Preskop's program, like I said, 52 days, and I didn't know anybody. There were 500 people on campus, and 100 were in patients, and 400 were support. And I was going through a lot of detox, right? And I didn't know anybody, and it was kind of scary. And you know what happened? Every single time I needed help, somebody was there. How does that work? Right? Every time somebody was there. So this concept of feeling supported every step of the way is a really important thing to acknowledge in the healing journey. I don't know how, even though I'm, suffering in this moment, I have these things that I could be grateful for. That right there.
Do you think that part of it was that you were seeking answers, and that so for some people, for example, they might feel like, well, things happen for a reason, that things just happen, things are happening for us. Do you think that of it had to do with that you were seeking the right combination of approach to get you where you needed to be, to improve on the situation, the environment, what was all happening to you?
Yes, and
there we go.
Is that Dr. Preskop said in this class, he said, "What are you doing to contribute to your pain?" And I was like, dude, you're in a whole room full of chronic pain patients, and you're saying that to us? Like, that was when it was in my head, because my viewpoint and perspective at that point was the pain is doing it to me. And when he asked, this is how important it is to ask the right question, right? When he asked that question, he completely turned the tables on that baby. And I suddenly went, oh, I actually have power here, where before I felt completely powerless. So we're responsible for our experience. We have to take 100% responsibility. I'm not saying I caused it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is my life, and I have to take responsibility for how it's showing up. And I'm not saying it's my fault. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I have power here, and we all have more power maybe than we realize that we do.
I 100% agree. I think one of my favorite analogies is thinking about the wind, that the wind hits us all in the face, and how we steer our sales will determine the outcome, has so much to do with the outcome of the story or the situation that we're facing, no matter what the situation. And I think that illustrates, that's pretty powerful. And that was a powerful question he asked to all of you, that I've never thought about a question like that before. But yeah, what are we contributing to the pain that we're experiencing? Are we, what are we getting out of it? You know?
Well, it was that, but it was also, the next thing he said was, don't judge the moment. And I'm like, I'm just sitting here minding my own business. I'm not judging anything. And I'm just saying my attitude was, you know, like, right.
Set up a little taller.
And, but I knew he had the room, and I listened, and I was like, a light bulb went off in my head. Oh, I've been judging my pain as bad my whole life. So here's the thing. Pain is information. It's not good or bad. It's information. What are you going to do with the information? You're going to fight with it? Are you going to look at it and go, oh, this is information for my next step? Right?
And I think I love how you say that, because it's not something I've not thought of pain in that manner before. You know, we can take the physiological aspect and say pain is inflammation, pain is the body's response, what's happening at the cellular level and all that implies. But pain is information. That's pretthen powerful.
You just described the kind of information that it is.
Yes. And so then did you know at that point that you were changing the course of your personal history?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as soon as I got out of, when I got up out of that bed, that was amazing. I had just enough, because I'd been in a bed for 10 days, and you lose all the muscle tone in 5. So they kind of poured me into a wheelchair. But when I got up out of the bed on my way to the wheelchair, I noticed something. I didn't have any pain in my back, and I'd had pain there for 40 years. And I was like, what? I was like, that was amazing. So right in that moment, I knew my life had changed.
That's incredible. That's pretty incredible. What I definitely want to talk about our book, about your book. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick commercial break. And of course, we're going to be right back here on The Health Revolution.
Life is so fragile, and we're constantly reminded just how fragile life can be, especially when we or a loved one is told we have cancer. Cancer survivor myself, I can tell you, we still feel very alone in this journey.
There's a study that's been shown that patients who are socially isolated have a worse prognosis, have a worse outcome than patients who are socially interconnected.
Buddies for Life is a non-profit cancer support group for those whose life has been impacted by cancer. Humor, hope, heart, and hugs.
Humor, hope, heart, hugs, and a whole lot of love.
Share this with your friends and family and support this community in every way you can. No one should face cancer alone.
I am a chemo buddy for life.
We are a buddies network.
No one does cancer alone.
Be a buddy.
And we are all here for you as a community of love.
We are chemo buddies for life.
And if you've heard 3 words, you have cancer, for yourself or someone else, you belong with us at Chemo Buddies for Life.
Healing through connections.
We're back here on the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison. We've been spending some quality time with Elizabeth Kipp, stress management and historical trauma specialist. And we've talked about, she shared with us how she's been able to overcome chronic pain, the pain that was really debilitating in so many ways for years. And so she had that moment where you, of course, Elizabeth, where you decided that you were looking at things from a different, you had that paradigm shift within you. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about your book. She, of course, is the best-selling author of The Way Through Chronic Pain, Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power. And I'd like to talk about that. Let's see if we can bring your book cover up and start to tell us a little bit more about, let's dive into the book and the tools that you use.
Sure. Thank you. The book is for chronic pain sufferers and those who care for them, doctors, nurses, family members, and friends. And it offers these beautiful proven techniques to clear pain and live a life free from suffering. I took, it's a little bit about my story, but not a lot. I really wanted people to understand the voice of a chronic pain patient, because we don't tell the truth. We're either quiet, which I was, I just didn't say things. Or we complain all the time. And neither one of those is accurate, right? So it was really important for me to bring that voice out, so everybody who's involved, who works with chronic pain, is in chronic pain, or works with people that are really understands kind of what's going on inside the mind.
Can you break down some of the approaches that that you find are important to address and utilize whenever you've worked with somebody who's had chronic pain?
Well, there's a hierarchy to healing. We have to start with the nervous system, and then we have to have a sense of belonging. I think you just had an ad on there where cancer patients in isolation don't do as well, right? We get disconnected. And then the third thing is, then we can learn, but we can't learn if we're dysregulated, and we can't learn if we're isolated and disconnected. We have to do these things in an order. So the first thing I really do with a new client is assess their nervous system. And usually they're like this. And so I actually will do, 3 minutes of very targeted kind of breath work, so that they in 3 minutes, you can see them calm down. And the look on their face is amazing. This is why it's so much fun to do this work. Because when you see somebody that's like wound up like a top, and they can have an experience like that in 3 minutes, where they start to relax, and they get the message, oh, my body really remembers how to do this relaxing thing. That's an opening, right? That's an opening for them. And that's a place that takes them from like, I've tried everything, I don't know what to do, right? To, oh, there's hope after all. It doesn't get any better than that.
Do you think that maybe that sometimes that response is because of maybe a level of despair in the here and the now, the having a heart that just kind of giving more power to the actual sensation when someone's in pain, or maybe someone who is experiencing anxiety? Do you think that it's that level of despair where they've taken their eyes off the road? Would you say that has anything to do with what's going on with them right then and there?
Yes and no. Remember, we said you can't separate mind, body from spirit.
Yes.
And so it's a cascade that's happening. Remember, we said chronic pain changes the brain. And we get this very strong negative bias, much stronger than we have normally. And that creates a biochemistry in the body. And those chemicals are addictive, which is, I know they're negative, but they're addictive. It's not like alcohol. It's different, but it's still the body gets used to a habit. This is how we do life. And it gets addicted, and we can get addicted to that state. It may not be pleasant, but it's what we know, and we kind of get caught in it. So it's a cascading effect that you're talking about. It's mind, body, and spirit. All of them are experiencing the same thing. So the body, the nervous system, and then the mind is following the nervous system. So yes, the mind goes into despair because the nervous system's going like, my stress response is stuck on, and I don't know how to get it off. And this is like, I wasn't made to do this. Right.
So the breath work is a great lead in. And what are some situations that you've been able to address in others who come to you and seeking that guidance and support for chronic pain?
Well, the first thing is just to get them to relax, right? So as I said, I'll do some breath work, and then I usually bring in ancestral clearing because it's interesting how much burden we come in with that we carry as kind of a weight. And when we work the process, people tend to feel lighter. It's very interesting. And I was astonished. I was not looking for this when John Newton brought it in. I was like, I had no idea what was going to happen, but we do carry this. So 3 minutes of breath work, and then I spend maybe 15 minutes with an ancestral clearing. And then the whole nervous system starts to really, now we've got a conversation going because the client feels safe. The nervous system's calmed down, feels connected because we're co-regulating, and now they can start learning, right? So we're addressing the hierarchy of healing, and they just, and also another thing about the work that I do is that it's not normal, really. It's not usual for a chronic pain sufferer to be able to sit in front of another person that's actually been on that journey that can really understand what they're going through. And so that's some value I bring to the table.
Well, I love how you say that, because I once heard this saying that you never take advice from someone who's not been where you're going. And so that would fall along the lines of you spending the time, the energy, the expertise to really dive into helping others. And I agree that it's not something that's common. It's not. When you and I had the conversation earlier, I got excited because I think it's an element of thinking outside the box where you are giving hope, that there is that level of optimism that cumulatively speaking, it allows us to keep moving forward. So I think this is huge. This is powerful.
Yeah, there's a plan, and for many years there was no plan. There was just like, get by with your wits and take these medications. But then when we understood that chronic pain changes the brain, and we can heal those changes by very specific modalities, science-based, evidence-based modalities, I'm like, hey, now we got a formula. Let's do it. Right.
Have you noticed that as you're having conversations with others who maybe deal with or who address chronic pain in others and patients and people who they see, do you notice that the dialogue is shifting, or do you notice that you are initiating that conversation to see where things are today?
The conversation is shifting because trauma is really becoming outside of the edge of the paradigm into the mainstream. And I never met anybody. First of all, addiction, right? We'll talk about it just for a moment. I never met an addict that wasn't a chronic pain sufferer first, and I never met a chronic pain, and I've met a lot, and I have never met a chronic pain sufferer who didn't have unresolved trauma in their system. So we got to get to the root. And this is why the conversation really in chronic pain is broken wide open. One integrated approach, you can't separate mind, body from spirit. You can't just look at an X-ray, right? And then this understanding the nature of trauma and how to heal it. So it's still kind of edgy stuff, but it's becoming more and more mainstream. And I love, as it's when I was in science, I love sitting at the edge of the paradigm and then trying to bring that in. That was kind of my sweet spot in the world. And it's just so interesting that I ended up in a job at this point that does exactly that. It's kind of amazing.
That's fantastic. What would you say to those who take care of loved ones who are suffering from chronic pain? What advice would you give to them?
I would suggest that you get Dr. Peter Prescott's book, Conquer Chronic Pain: An Innovative Mind-Body Approach. He passed away a few years ago, but he left us this beautiful book, which is the doctory researchery book, with some beautiful exercises in the back, and then follow up with mine, because mine's like the user's manual to that one. You have to inform yourself, and they're not the only books out there. Dr. John Sarno, who also passed away, he's left a great book. Dr. Joseph Dispenza does amazing work. He's amazing guy. There are other doctors out there. There's just not as many as there are. They don't really teach this in medical school, so you kind of have to look out there for people that know how to do this. Yeah,
and I think that this is, and it's very telling that that's ever evolving, and that clearly you are a trailblazer in your space, and for such a benefit for those who are suffering from chronic pain. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back here on the Health Revolution.
Jeff Pearson here, host of Invisible Condition, where we talk about all the people who are living and thriving with all those conditions that you can't necessarily see from the outside. Join me every Tuesday and Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time on E360 TV.
We're back here on the Health Revolution, and we've been spending quality time with Elizabeth Kipp, stress management and historical trauma specialist, and the best-selling author of The Way Through Chronic Pain: Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power. We've got only just a couple minutes left. Elizabeth, do you have any upcoming events that we need to be aware of?
I'm actually right in the middle of a course that I teach online every second Tuesday of every month, or second Monday of every month, till the end of the year, called Heal Here Now: Mindfulness and Trauma Recovery. And it's a deep dive into really the tools you need in order to recover from unresolved trauma in the body. It's an overview. Each class is 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, and we one class a month, and it's offered on a donation basis. And I think the link is in the chat or wherever.
Yes, in the chat, in the show notes, and also let's go ahead and let's pull up your website of if anyone is wanting to get in touch with you. What I love, your website is very comprehensive. There's a breakdown of the different topics that we've covered today. And of course, today was just scratching at the surface. But now your program, the meeting, is that's something that's carrying on till the end of 2023? Is it something that you're going to continue in 2024?
Well, that program, once the live classes are finished, goes on to be an evergreen course, so everybody can access that. And I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing in 2024 in terms of live stuff, but I'm in the kitchen. I'm in the sandbox, cooking up something.
She's in the kitchen. She's cooking. Yes, I love that. So I know we're starting to run out of time, Elizabeth. I appreciate your energy, your information. You obviously represent a space where we can all benefit from, and I appreciate you being here with us today.
Well, thank you so much. It was a joy to be with you again.
Yes, and for those of you tuning on in, of course, you know, if you missed the live, you're catching the replay right now. You can also check out our website here at thehealthrevolutiontv.com for information. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, and remember that the show notes are going to have all the information for today. And that is all the time that we have. So with that, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison. We are live Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on The Health Revolution. Until then, until next time, take care. We'll see you soon.